Hey guys, Chris Field here. We're gonna give it a minute or two. I'm actually a little early, which feels pretty great. But got my friend Jeremy Dew here. I'll introduce him properly in just a minute. But I'm gonna let folks get on. I know people are finishing dinner, and some of you are gonna be getting kids to bed, depending on what time your kids go to bed and how old they are. I guess it depends. So, like I said, I'm Chris Field. My friend Jeremy Dew is here. I'll give him a proper introduction in just a minute, but I want to welcome you guys and to tell you how much I appreciate you spending your evening with us, and really looking forward to the conversation with Jeremy tonight. So, like I said, I'm about a minute or two early, so let me give it a second to let folks jump in. And again, I know we got parents putting kids to bed and stuff. So if you think this would be a conversation that your parent friends would find helpful, feel free to share the conversation on your news feed. You should have a share button on your on the post, and you should be able to share it. But only do that if you feel like it'd be helpful. Maybe you can test us out and see. Wait like 5 minutes, and if you feel like there's value in the conversation, then you can share with your friends. So, like I said, we're just now 8 o'clock, and I know this is I didn't want to do it too late because we had people from all over the country. So I know we had some East Coast folks and some West Coast folks, and so I wanted to try to pick a time that would be the most reasonable for everybody. But just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to come around the table collectively. Obviously, not a literal table, as all of those tables have been closed at this point throughout most of America, but to gather around this collective table as a community and to have conversations around, we'll just call it COVID tonight, so we won't keep saying coronavirus over and over, but which of course, the coronavirus has existed for a while, which is fascinating, which is why they're saying COVID-19 is because this is the 2019 strain of the coronavirus. So, all right, so let me get started. I know folks are going to jump in more over the next several minutes, but this is my friend Jeremy Dew. Jeremy is a licensed professional counselor. He specializes in families, children, teenagers. I don't know how much of his work is with children and teens, but I would guess at least half or more of it probably is around children and teens, and certainly around almost 100% of it probably when you factor in parents who are working with children and teens. So Jeremy's been a good friend of mine for a long time, and after the response that we had the last couple of days with the fun activities we've been able to do with your kids, I really thought and heard from other parents, both virtually and in real life, parents are just having a hard time talking about this topic. And I think that as I've thought about it, and I have 4 kids, 10, 8, 5, and 2, and as I've thought about it and even just had conversations in my work, in my daily life, I keep finding myself trying to, I don't want to say explain away, but almost minimize, like, yeah, I know it's not a big deal, but I know it is a big deal. I kind of find myself almost debating my own sort of psyche on how big a deal this is. And I think just within the last day or two, I've stopped backing off that, and I've started to say to people, no, this is a historic moment. I mean, this is truly historic, and not in a good way. And we talked just before we started that this feels a lot like September 11th in the scope of it, the collective challenge of it, but even bigger because it's people around the world. But I think more difficult because it came on so slowly. So September 11th, we had this moment where it was like, oh, the world changed. But if we look back 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we were all doing, quote, normal stuff.
At least here in Texas.
In Texas, certainly. Yeah, in most of the United States. Yeah. Washington had started to be affected, which is actually where you're from, interestingly. Yeah. But except for those very couple of cities, the vast majority of us, it was life as normal, business as usual, just 2-3 weeks ago. And then slowly things started changing and closing and changing and closing. and all of a sudden now our kids are home, and all of a sudden we can't go to work, and all of a sudden restaurants are closed. And so it's the same scale as September 11th as far as collective challenge and pain.
Yeah.
But it came on so slowly that I feel like it caught some of us by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk some about how we can just acknowledge and kind of embrace that this is historic, and it's a huge deal, and it's okay for us to embrace that and to own that.
Yeah. I think I've had a lot of conversations in my office about this, and I supervise a number of clinicians who are talking with their clients about this. And I think one of the words that keeps coming up is all of the uncertainty, like how each of us, just as adults, are managing the uncertainty on a day-to-day basis, and trying to make sense of all the information. And Chris kind of brought up this reference to 9/11 as we were talking. He's like, I don't know if that actually fits with this, but it feels connected. And I've actually been thinking about that, because it feels like so many of us are trying to consume a lot of information through the news. And I remember when 9/11 happened, I was in Philadelphia, and I sat in front of a TV for 2 full days to try and make sense of what was going on. And so, I think whenever we're talking about what we're going to do with our kids, I think it feels really important for us to situate ourselves first. Like, this is a lot for us as adults, and we all have our own relationships with uncertainty and fear and anxiety. And so it feels really important, though, in this unique season, to kind of first figure out what am I doing with this? What are my friends doing with this? How much news am I consuming? How am I processing this? And it might or might not be the same way that your kids are processing it. But it feels like a really good place to start, at least.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think giving ourselves the freedom to say this is a big deal, and this uncertainty is scary. Even as adults, there's a lot we don't know still, and if you've paid much attention, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, I think we're still on the front end of this, which is why this conversation is so important and all of that. So can you talk a little now, getting more specifically into kids? So most everyone tuning in is a parent or a grandparent. They're engaging and interacting with kids. Some of them are teachers, certainly. So now they're going to be moving to online courses where they're engaging. And the truth is, for the teachers, the kids who are going to be on their computer in a Zoom classroom, those aren't the same kids that left their class 2 weeks ago. Like, the world is different, and that feels a little hyperbolic, but it's not. The world, it's a different world, and a kid has not sat on a computer before and had to deal with his teacher or her teacher, right? So can you, so they're here, they're wanting to gain some tools and some insight as to how to have this conversation better and to navigate it with some clarity that maybe they feel like they're lacking right now. So talk to us. What's your broad counsel to people listening, watching, that do have young children? I mean, what would you say to them?
Yeah. So I think a few things as we get started. One would be, my assumption is you're already talking about coronavirus in your home. So even as we talked tonight, I felt really aware of, as parents, just in our generation, we have a lot of information, and we tend to be pretty anxious parents. We really want to get everything right. So even that there's a couple hundred people watching this at 8 p.m. when this is like the 1 hour that your kids might be asleep, and you can have to Netflix and drink a glass of wine. I feel like, given that, here's what I want to start with is, one, I'm going to offer some guideposts. And if you've done something totally different, that's okay. This is a process that we're all kind of trying to work through. Two, I'm assuming you're a good parent. And so that often feels like something that a lot of parents struggle with when they come into my office, because they're coming in with fears and concerns, or they've done something wrong. And so in this, you're literally watching a video of someone talking about how to talk to your kids at 8 p.m. at night. So can we that's a baseline. You're a good parent.
Good.
And even if you feel like my child is really anxious and I about all of this, and I might be to blame for that because I feel anxious about it, I still feel like it's really important as a baseline for us to have some compassion here for all of us as parents in this as we're navigating it. I also want to be clear, I am not the expert on your children. And that would be true if you were sitting in my office and I had known your kids for 5 years. You are still always going to be the expert on your kids. So again, as I offer some of my thoughts on this, think of them as guideposts. Think of them as okay, this is how we've been going, and based on what Jeremy said, this is kind of, and this is based on what Jeremy and Chris are talking about. Maybe we need to veer a little bit further over here. Maybe we need to come back to a conversation and reflect on it a little differently. But that feels really important. Also feels important for us to be aware of our own feelings in this, and to continue to be aware of that, and to take care of ourselves. So my wife's a teacher, and she sent out a schedule. It's all over the place, a schedule of like, hey, this would be a good routine to keep your kids on. And she got a funny one back, which was, let the kids be on screens from 8 to 10, wake up at 10 a.m., drink by 4. And the idea that I found really funny about that is that part of that is like, hey, as parents, like, we're going through something, again, that feels unprecedented, and we're trying to make sense of it ourselves. And so we got to continue to find compassion for ourselves and take care of ourselves as we're in, it's not vacation, but I'm not going to pretend that everyone's really excited to have their kids home this early. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot in this unique situation, and not just out of a place of concern about health or about our loved ones, but about our finances as well. And so if we lose it on our kids, if we have already feeling guilty walking into this because of how we left bedtime tonight, that is okay. We can have these ruptures with our kids, and there's still opportunities to repair. So good. That feels like, I don't know, at least a baseline of where we want to start here.
No, that's great. So let's talk about, I know you typically would split things into age groups based on maturity level and the ability to comprehend certain amounts of information. So let's break that up. What age groups, what would the youngest age group be, you think?
Yeah, so I think beginning in pre-K kindergarten, our kids are going to know a little bit about this. I think I have a 5-year-old daughter, and then I have 2 sons. One is 7.5, and then one's 10.5. And so for my 5-year-old, I think she's like mildly aware that something's different, but she's not super concerned about this. She wants some explanation of why she can't see her friends at school, but more time with mom and dad to play at home. She's pretty excited about it, and honestly, that's okay. I don't think that for pre-K and kindergarten, we should have the news on while they're in the room. I think that we're wanting to protect them a lot more from this, and so I think having a really simple script of that there's just 1 or 2 sentences even of there's a big thing happening in our world right now where there's a sickness that's getting passed around, and most of us, even if we catch the sickness, are going to be just fine, but we're staying at home just to keep everybody safe and make sure it doesn't spread. So really simple, doesn't need to be, you don't need to go into tons of detail about that. That's a really simple script.
And at that age, they're going to guide a lot of that conversation because they're going to be disinterested.
Yes.
Yes. As soon as you say,
exactly,
there's a sickness and some people are getting it and we want to help keep other people healthy, they're like, I'm gone.
Exactly.
When's snack time? They're just done. So it's not like, hey, I had more to say to you. Could you come back?
Yep. Yeah. And I think the most important message we want to send to our kids at this age, pre-K, kindergarten, is that their parents and other adults are here to keep them safe. So That's what they need from us. Is they don't need tons of information about this. They just need a very little piece of information that it's happening, and it's not just spring break extended. That we are like there's a unique situation, but we're okay, and we're staying safe here. So.
And so the 4 and 5, 6-year-old who is more inquisitive, or who did hear something on the news, or somehow a friend said something to them, and they're peppering.
Yep.
How do we honor their curiosity?
Yes.
But also not give them more information than their little brains can handle.
Yep. Yeah. So Chris and I have talked about this a number of times in our parenting, that we're both pretty open parents with our kids. Probably more open than lots of parents are. We talk about the birds and the bees and that kind of stuff with them, and starting pretty young. Don't mistake your kids' questions that feel like adult questions as something that needs an adult answer. When your kid is more inquisitive about it, and again, we're talking about 4, 5, 6-year-olds. When they're asking more questions, again, we might offer a really short answer to their question, and then just offer a little more reassurance. So again, it doesn't need to be in their questions. We would honor that we hear what their question is, and to be thinking about a really simple answer. Again, they don't need to know how many cases are in Brazos County and versus Houston and Dallas versus Washington versus Wuhan. So that's not important. Think in terms of really simple scripts for them on answering their questions around that stuff. So,
that's good. So how about elementary school students?
Yeah. One thing I would add is kind of beyond your script, what your kids need from you at this age right now, 6, with you. So now, given that you have like a lot of other things you're managing, this might be a big ask. But be thinking in terms of when my kids are getting all this kind of time at home, it's good that they still have structure at home, some kind of structure at home. We're still navigating that. I thought with my boys it'd be great for us they want to watch Star Wars, and I didn't, but that's what they really wanted to do, and we're going to do that every night for my 7 and 10-year-old, and in that they were exhausted after day 2 or day 3 of us watching these movies in a row. So we had to taper it back. Like, hey, oh right, we still need early bedtime. We need a regular bedtime, a regular wake up time. We need some routine of when we're all eating breakfast together and lunch together. So particularly for 4 to 6-year-olds, routine is still going to be somewhat important in that, and also some good child-directed playtime. So if your kid's having a little bit of anxiety or uncertainty, maybe they have a little more knowledge about this, and they maybe they know, maybe in certain parts of the country, maybe they know someone who's gotten sick with this, or there's someone in your family that's really involved in this whole thing, or they've overheard mom and dad talking, or they've overheard parents talking. This kind of child-directed playtime, or the child-directed playtime, is really important because that's how kids are working out what they're doing, and so they get a little more power in their life to tell daddy, you have to be Elsa, and I'm going to be Anna, and so those are places where they get to connect with you, and as they connect with us, they can feel soothed, they can feel more relaxed. That doesn't have to be all day. We're talking about 10 to 20 minutes at a time, but it feels like an important piece.
I think it's important. I work a lot from home.
Yep.
And I know a lot of parents don't. And I want to kind of mention something that I've not done well, in the hopes that it might save them some trouble. And don't mistake being home all day for being present with your kids.
Yeah.
Because if you're not used to working at home, you're going to feel like you saw your kids a lot more during the day than a normal day.
Yep.
But they're not going to feel like you saw them because you were busy all day working. And so I want to really encourage, and again, this is a struggle for me. Leave your phone in the room when you finish work for the day. Close the computer, leave the phone wherever you're working at your house, and really be present, even if it's just 10 to 20 to 30 minutes. I know my kids have really the routine we've established long before this is that when I get home from work is when mom starts cooking dinner. And that's me and the 4 kids and mom gets a break.
Mm-hmm.
But they are like chomping at the bits by the time they're like, is dad going to be here? Is dad going to be here? And they're ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I come in and I do this more than I care to admit, and I'm still on a call, and I'm, or I'm trying to finish a text conversation, they're standing there holding their basketball like, Dad, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. So if you're not used to working at home, don't mistake seeing your kids a lot visually for actually seeing them emotionally, because they're not the same thing. And I think that's important. So anything else on elementary kids, or you want to move on?
Yeah, so with elementary kids, I would say it's actually still fairly similar. I would say our first through fourth still asking more mature questions about it. They're more curious. They might have a little more information. My 10-year-old, who's a tween, is a little more involved with his friendships. So he's starting to miss his friends, and he's bummed about not being at school. And I think as it comes to this conversation, I think it's important at this age to just be checking, hey, what do you know about this virus? Like, what have you heard us say? What are your friends saying about it? What were they saying about it at school before you came home? And how are you feeling about it? Those feel like questions that our kids begin to have a little more language for their feelings at this age. Again, around 6 to 10 years old. And so for us to just kind of open up the conversation a little bit. Yeah. And again, it's really important. Don't mistake their adult questions for a need for an adult answer. We have more perspective at our age. Most of us have more perspective at this age than our kids do in elementary school, and so they don't need super extensive answers. Now, my older two, who are 7 and 10, they have more questions about, well, are grandma and grandpa safe? Like, are they going to be okay? And it's like, yes, I think they will be, and here's what we're doing about that. So they need to know, like, what are we doing as parents to make sure our grandparents are safe? Unfortunately, that means we didn't get to go swimming with them this week, like my mom had hoped we would do. But what it does mean is that we can FaceTime with them, and we can check in on them and just see how grandma and grandpa are feeling about this. So there's some good opportunities there to help our kids begin to be a little more thoughtful about what it means to be a good world citizen.
So how, what if how do we find the balance between helping our kids understand this is a big deal, both globally, and we do need to have good hygiene, wash our hands longer than we normally would, keep our hands out of our mouth, but also not scaring them to where, they're constantly walking around like, did you touch that? Did she touch that? Have you washed your hands? Yeah. What's the balance there?
Which again comes back to our own anxiety and what we're doing to take care of ourselves in that. So a couple of pieces is, still as elementary school kids, they really don't need to be seeing the news a ton. The news is a lot. It's a lot for us to process.
That's right.
Even for myself, I'm kind of holding myself to limits. I want to know more. I want to know what my county is doing. I want to know. I want to know more about it, and I feel really aware of when I'm consuming too much of that. My body doesn't have time to catch up. With why am I feeling so tense about this? So again, part of it I think is, as we are working to ground ourselves as parents, this becomes easier for us to help our kids find grounding around it. So I think one thing we can do with our elementary school kids is say, hey, this is why I'm a little more antsy about us washing our hands. And if you wrestle with anxiety as an adult, if you feel really uncertain about this unique season, that is okay. That makes so much sense. And it's okay for your elementary school kids to know a little bit more about that, for you to just be open about that. I struggle with feeling more anxiety and stress sometimes, and this is a unique season. I'm doing my best to take care of myself in that, but you might hear me get onto you more about washing your hands, about sneezing into your elbow, about throwing your tissues in a trash can, not on the sofa. Like, those are things that I'm just going to be thinking about a little bit more, and unfortunately that means we're not going to hang out with your friends for a little bit. And that's out of us taking care of others in our community. So that's kind of where I feel like there's a balance there of they need to know a little bit about, again, when we have a sense of this is what we actually have control over, that gives us a little more sense of security. Not all of it, but for our kids, that tends to be enough, especially if we're limiting some of the information. I even think about with my 10-year-old, he's really curious and he's really interested in science. He wants to know more about it. So there was an afternoon where he spent a little time looking at other viruses and epidemics and pandemics, and was kind of bringing this information to the table. So this is where it gets complicated, right? Is for a lot of families, you have more than one kid. So you have a teenager that, oh, this could, they have their own way of talking about it, which might be to make a rib at one of your other siblings, at one of their siblings. And so part of this does, as you hear us talk about it, it's important for us to have those individual conversations. A lot of time it's at bedtime, right? Where we have those individual conversations of, hey, this is what I need from you as an older sibling. Hey, how are you feeling about what your sister said earlier? And if the kid says fine, then I would say take them at their word. And unless we see other symptoms, and we'll talk about those at the end, but that's in general, helping your kids understand this at different developmental stages is important. And then as a family, I think where you can check in is, how's everybody doing today? How's this working for all of us in this weird season of us all being at home together?
And I think not trying to act like it's not a weird season.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's not like business as usual, guys. No, this is normal.
Yeah.
3-4 weeks off of school, no big deal. But then you might go back, but you might not go back, and you might never have that teacher again, and you could have. It's okay to say, like, we've never done this before.
Yep.
Like, I've never done it. You're safe, and I got you, and you're okay.
Yep.
But I've never done this.
Yeah.
I'm 37 years old, kids. I've never had a time like this before. And I think it's good for our kids to hear us say, like, oh, even mom and dad haven't done this. Mm-hmm. That's why I feel a little bit confused and stressing it, because it is confusing and it is stressful.
Yep. Yeah, and I think along those lines, it feels important too. Like we might have more of a timeline in mind of what, hey, this week the CDC said that we're looking at weeks or months, not years. We don't need to share all of that information with our kid. I mean, really, we can be thinking about a week or 2 weeks ahead for our elementary school kids at least. They don't need to know that you're probably not going to have school for the rest of the year. They don't necessarily need to know all of that yet.
So talk to us about middle school and high school kids.
Yeah. So with our tweens, with our 10 to 12, it's a lot more the same. I think they have more space to process this. Their friendships are a lot more important. I think for a lot of the families I'm working with, that's becoming more complicated. It's like they're a little more annoyed. Like, why can't I just have? All of us are at home. Like, why can't we just do this? Or why can't we? Oh, you have time off now. Why can't we go on a vacation? They have more questions around like wanting to be with their friends. They might have more information coming into them from their friends. And so I think there's a couple of pieces that feel important. Is one, that we're creating some context where they can still feel connected to their friends. And so that might mean, and you're going to hear me say it, I think as, in general, you'll hear us as therapists say, really limit their screen time. This is a time when, yes, try to put some limits on their screen time, and it might be okay to loosen up on some stuff for us to all get through this and for them to find connection. There's literally no other options.
Yeah,
right?
they're very disconnected.
This becomes a way, and I don't mean necessarily for them to be in the news and looking at all that stuff as much, but more for them to be able to connect with friends.
Yeah.
And maybe that's through online gaming, or that's through, my son is doing stuff with Google Classroom, and they're posting videos to each other, which are really sweet. So it's a way for them to feel a little more connected, and still needs to be limits around that stuff for our tweens, but it's I think we can loosen up about a bit on it.
So high school kids.
Yeah. So the big shift that happens for us as parents with our teenagers is that we become a lot less of their director of telling them what is and isn't, and a lot more of a consultant. They their friends are far more important in general to a lot of their just their processing than we're going to be. Now, I think the role that we get to play is just checking in. Is, hey, how are you doing with all this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is weird, right? Like, how are you feeling about not being around friends? How are you feeling about this virus? How are you feeling about the people in your life that might be affected by this? Some of our teenagers are going to be way more open about that than others. So I think some parents have the fortune of having teenagers that are really open, and others don't, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything about you as a parent. It's often our teenagers they're really working on their independence, and that's just where it's more important. So so if they're missing friends, like, hey, what do you need from me in this? Like, how could I help in this? And for some of our teenagers and even tweens, there's a little more. And I saw this with Parkland, with the school shooting. And it felt like this really unique situation, right? Where something happened and the teenagers became advocates. The teenagers wanted to do something about it. They wanted solutions. And so a lot of those kids at Parkland really stood up. And so I think in this unique season, I think our teenagers can feel more empowered. For the teenagers that are really stressing about this more and see the virus as something that they're concerned about, that they're maybe fearful of, feeling a little more empowered. Well, what can we do about it? Like, give ideas about how we could help folks in our community by buying gift cards from our local restaurants, by sending, could we send some gifts to our healthcare professionals? Or I've thought often of all of the folks that are working with the elderly right now, and all of the doctors and nurses, the folks that are at the hospital and their exposure to this. Is there anything we can do to support them in that? So that on their end, I think a lot more of our role is helping them to just process. And for some of our kids, it can feel more empowering if they want to do something about it. For us to be, again, someone to sound off with. A lot of our teenagers don't really need to hear all of our feelings and opinions on this. that might not be something they care about at all. Is what we hear about, what we think about it. They might. Some of them might be really curious about that. But really, I see our role in this kind of unique moment in time is really to be listeners and to be thoughtful about how our kids are processing it. So
I think one thing too, if you have high school students, they are mourning missing significant parts of the year. I mean, I played baseball in high school, and I would have missed this entire baseball season, which for me at that age in life, there was nothing I cared more about. And you know, we have kids. I mean, a lot of high schools aren't going to be able to have high school graduation for seniors, prom. I mean, so I think it's really important that we give space to our kids feeling sadness. Like, hey, this sucks. Then when they say, like, I want to be with my friends. I want to be enjoying my freshman year. I want to be enjoying my sophomore year. I want to be enjoying. They're going to have that language way more than our younger kids.
Absolutely.
And I think my tendency as a parent, not a positive, I'm kind of beating myself up tonight, but not a positive is I want to move them past that out of my own.
Sure.
Because I can't fix it. And so because I'm like, I can't do anything. I can't buy that. I can't finagle that for you. So I want to be like, so I would tend to say something like, well, think about all the people whose parents died in China, you know, and not really, but like I would want to move them like, hey, it's worse for some people
outside of themselves.
But the truth is, it stinks. And it's okay for us to say, gosh, I know that. I mean, I am so sorry that's real, and I know that is really hard, and I'm sorry. And if there was any way I could do anything about that, you know, I would do it. But just know, I am so sorry because that stinks. And I think that's really important, even for adults.
I agree.
To lament what they're missing. I mean, I emailed with a woman today. She had to reschedule her wedding. I mean, that's no small thing, right? I mean, she's having to reschedule a wedding. There's people that are having to postpone funerals, you know, and it's like, wow, this is hard. And so I think even giving ourselves space as adults, so we don't have to be the tough soldiers to say, it's fine, there's people worse than us. Like, there are people worse than us, and we should be mindful and have that perspective.
But that's really, I think, for us as adults. Like, I think for our teenagers, that's a lot. Like, it's
the most important thing to them.
I think as much as we wrestle with that as parents when we see our teenagers seemingly being really self-centered about, and that's really big. That is where they're at developmentally. Is they are thinking about where they are and themselves in this, and they will grow out of that.
Yeah.
That is something that is something that we grow through. And this there might be moments for you to speak into what it means to be a good citizen, a good world citizen, what it means to have empathy for others, and those moments to speak into it are not when they're really, really upset about the things that feel small to us when we're thinking about our bank accounts, or we're thinking about our loved ones and our parents, are they safe, and the people that have lost lives in this or have lost family members. Those are not the things that our teenagers are always going to be focused on.
That's
so
right.
we can I think that feels really important, Chris, that regardless of our kids' age, we need to work on how do we validate their feelings, and it's okay if that's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
Like, that is part of it.
Yeah, and we grew out of it. I mean, we were the same.
We did mostly grow out of it.
You all were the same way. We were the same way. There's just
Yeah.
seasons where that self-focus is more there, and this is a reasonable season for our high school kids.
Yeah.
I don't have high school kids, but I teach a college course, and I was emailing with my students this week because we'll start our online course. It was an in-person course, now been moved to online course. We'll start on Monday. And when I was writing to them, I felt unusually emotional, even though I only teach one class a semester, so I don't consider myself like a full-time teacher or faculty member by any means. I felt like in the email, I was just like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
well, can you email me back and tell me if you're okay? Like, what's happening for your life right now? You know, and they were just, my students are emailing me back, and they're like, man, this has been weird. Like, I'm still with my parents. I don't know whether to come back to College Station. I don't know whether to stay here. I don't really want to be here, but I don't want to be there and just sit in my room all the time. And there's just like, this is just weird. That was the consensus, like, over and over for the university students. Like, this is just weird. And I'm like, hey, thanks for writing. This is weird. Like, I'm feeling that same weirdness, and I don't know what else to say to you except I'm here with you in that weirdness, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your face on that Zoom conference on Monday. And we're not going to even jump back into business as usual. I'm going to spend that whole first class just being like, how are you guys doing? Like, seriously, what's happening right now in the world? You know, this is crazy. So,
And that feels, I think that feels important. I don't know how many of you are parents to college students, or even parents of young adults, or parents of kids that now have their own kids. But I think it feels important for us to be checking in of just, how are you doing with this?
Right.
Like, what's it like? I mean, I've talked to a number of college students that are really lamenting things that they're missing out on, and they have way more clarity around this is a huge deal. And so but they're wrestling with what it's going to mean for the rest of their semester. Here at A&M, there's the big event. There's elections for all kinds of social clubs, and there's a lot of stuff that's just being shut down, and there's just a lot of angst about, gosh, and will I be able to hack it in an online class? And so to be thoughtful of your kids in that as well, in college and beyond, how they're managing their stress around this. So.
Okay, so I want to ask you one more question, and then let's open it up to questions. So
I can see there's already
we have several questions. We're probably going to restart that clock just so I don't have to go scroll all the way back up, because there's 40-something comments. But before you ask your questions, let me ask you one more question, which somebody asked yesterday, and you've spoken to it here and there. But parents are struggling with schedule right now. So kids are home. Most parents are home. Some schools are sending work. Some schools aren't sending work. Some schools are sending lots of work. Some schools are sending almost no work. What would you say around schedule? What would you say around consistency? What would you say around, I know you joked about it, but making our kids really focus on schoolwork? You know, a lot of parents are not used to also being teachers. I've seen a lot of funny jokes on the internet this week about, hey, I'm hereby proposing teachers make $1 billion a year, which is great. That I think as parents we're reminded, like, man, teachers, bless them. This is no joke. but knowing the dynamics that parent kid is going to be very different than parent teacher,
Yep.
and the strangeness of this situation, like what counsel would you give to parents on scheduling, expectations, etc.?
Yeah. So one, again, baseline, lots of compassion for yourselves. Like,
Yeah.
we are in uncharted waters
That's right.
as parents.
We've never done this before.
No, and I you know, there's I think that in general our kids are going to continue to do best if there's some kind of schedule. So if it's setting a time limit, I think what's working in our family is we've done clean for screens, we've done some schoolwork for some screen time, or choosing an activity together, some combination of those things. So I think it feels important that we kind of say, hey, we can't get this far behind. If your schools are giving work, like we just can't get that far out. I want to make sure that that we're following through on some of this, and this might be hard for us. Like, I'm not great at this. Your teacher is far better at this than I am, for a lot of us anyhow. So we're gonna keep trying to work this out. Again, like, I can't stress this enough. I think as parents, we really, really want to do everything right the first time. And I think instead what we end up doing is we end up creating pretty anxious kids, because our kids feel all of our desire to like do it all right, and make sure that our kids don't fail at all, and make sure that we don't ever, and that we don't ever fail at it. And so instead, I think if we can just kind of continue to have open conversations, I think it's gone well for us in terms of check-ins as a family, of like, how are we doing here? Like, how are we doing in terms of how did today go for us as a family? Let's be open about that. And knowing enough kids in my work, like, some kids are going to be pretty brutally honest of, dad was terrible today, and you lost it, and that was really annoying to me. And if we're asking for feedback, it gives us some ability to respond to it when we're a little more calm about it. So I think some openness around, we're trying to navigate something together that's new, to try and set some kind of schedule. And again, at least here in our county, we're just on week 2 of this. Week 1 was spring break, and now we're into week 2 of this. For others, my friends in Washington that have been doing this longer, and will likely, their schools will likely be out a lot longer than us too. And so with that, I think pacing ourselves, and giving lots of grace for ourselves and for our kids as they're having to navigate a teacher at home that's not near as good as their teacher at school, and classmates that are siblings, which sucks.
Annoying.
So.
I would add just 2 quick things to that, and that would be tips that I give to anyone, even as adults, on how to be more productive. And that is, I would maybe over breakfast ask your kids that are doing schoolwork, hey, what's 2 things you really need to get done today?
Okay.
Because sometimes when we feel like we have the whole day, it's like, I'll get to it, and then they never get to it. So you say, what are 2 things for school today that would be good for you to get done? Right? So they can prioritize. And then for a lot of kids and for a lot of adults, our best time is in the morning. And so let's say, hey, let's get those 2 things done, and then we'll have the rest of the day to do whatever else we want to do. Because the longer we go and the more they're on screens, and the more it's like, I don't want to do that. I'd rather do this. Like, let's just get it right out of the gate. And also, as parents, I think it helps us open up that dialogue. That's a nice way of saying, what do you need to get done today? So hey, what are 2 things you'd like to get done today for school, that might be important for you for school? So okay, so let's do this. We have about 15 minutes, and so I'd love to open it up to you guys. And I know not all of you have questions, or some of you are going to be more likely to ask a question than others. So if you have a question, if you'll go ahead and write it. If the rest of you who are probably not going to ask questions will like the questions maybe that are most related to you, or most relatable to you. If you already wrote a question, if you could write it again, if you don't mind, because there's almost 50 comments, and it'll take me a while to scroll back up and cut through everything. It's just a comment versus a question. So if you don't have any questions, if we just solved all of your parenting troubles, then I can give you our Venmo, and you know exactly where to send it. I'm just kidding. So, all right, well, we'll start with Marcy since she was courageous enough to jump out there first. So, Marcy, you can all read it, but I'll read it. Smart 11-year-old who's medically high risk for coronavirus, scared to sleep alone. They've been keeping him home since Thursday after school. Suggestions to help with his anxiety. Man, you came to the right guy.
Yeah, Marcy. One, I'm so sorry. I think part of our work when our kids are really struggling, you've named a few things. One is scared to sleep alone, and that it sounds like he's probably thinking about a lot. As a smart kid, he's probably processing a lot around it, and so I think we want to be watchful of our kids and their anxiety. I think some places that can be really helpful for an 11-year-old are to ask him how he's feeling, to talk about what's he thinking about, to let him have some space, and our job in that is not to go back and correct or change what he's saying. We might want to redirect at some point, but I think initially it's just validating his feelings. Yeah, this is scary. Like, this is a big deal. And I want you to know these are the things that we're doing as parents to work to keep you safe. I think it can be really helpful at 11 for our kids to journal about it. For some kids, it's art, to be able to draw. So as they're processing kind of all of their feelings around it, to kind of get it on paper. I just want you to spend some time today. Maybe that's a school assignment of to just write like these are all the thoughts that I have around that. And our job isn't to just go through and tick those off. Hey, this isn't legitimate, or this, but instead to say, man, you got a lot going on. And so that validation helps our kids with some of their anxiety. I think some of the other things that we know, even for us as adults, and our anxiety around that is to get some exercise where that's possible. Honestly, I feel like if our kids are afraid to sleep alone, therapists will have different takes on this. I personally think if you or if you have a partner or a spouse with you in it, if you feel comfortable sleeping with them for some nights, I think this is kind of one of those unique times where this doesn't mean forever, but I take this from a really tender approach of validating where our kids are at. I was trying to think of any other ones. If our kids are a little younger and struggling with more anxiety, I think that tends to come out in their play, and so it's our as kids, it's kind of it's our way when we don't have all of the language for it. It's our way of processing. So you'll see where kids play out different scenes, and so I've had kids with pretty severe trauma in my office playing out different scenes over and over and over again. And what's really helpful for them in that over time is that they're miniaturizing that experience into something that they can actually control. And really, in many ways, that's what we're doing as adults, as we find language and make sense of what's going on. And so for your 11-year-old, he's on that cusp. His play is probably not going to be his go-to, but needing some validation and some language for what's going on for him is going to be important. And then the other piece I'd say is, there are a bunch of us. Even I don't know where you are, Marcy, but there are a bunch of us that are offering telehealth. The country actually, our governing boards have loosened up a lot of restrictions on us doing video counseling, and so there's a lot of us that would be happy to help in that. So feel free to reach out to someone in your community, and it might be helpful for your son to talk with someone, and it might be helpful for you guys to just talk with someone, and they can do that over the phone or over video from your house. So
I'm not a therapist, but I think the only thing I would add, which is he nailed everything. It's okay, I think, and totally reasonable for your son to feel kind of anxious right now. I mean, this is a big deal, and it's good that he's mindful that he has a compromised immune system, because he's probably going to be more likely to take care of himself and I think it might be neat even to make sure he sees the effort so many other people are taking
Yeah.
to make sure he stays safe. So it's not just that mom or dad will lay with you and make sure you feel safe. People around the world are stopping their regular lives right now to help people like you be safe. And I think he might find something about that really beautiful and sort of transcendent of the moment. So thank you for that. It's a great question, and certainly I'm certain you're a really good mom, and he feels really well seen by you. So she asked about they're in Pennsylvania. Marcy said, yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
Okay.
So Stacy asked about, she has a college student, senior in high school, a freshman in high school, and a first grader. That's what I'm talking about, Stacy. And then your husband just goes to be a pilot. I mean, come on. All right, just kidding. But how do you separate and monitor Zoom school? So it sounds like Monday they're going to start a new kind of schedule where probably all of them, if the college students like my college students, they're all going to have assignments. They're all going to have schoolwork. Any tips for her on that practically?
Yeah, I feels like a really difficult logistical nightmare, Stacy. I really don't know. I mean, I think on some level, having, gosh, there's just such a big spread. I think I would say if it makes sense. I mean, your high school kids and your college kid hopefully can manage some of their own time around that. Of, hey, this is my expectation, and I think for our high school kids, we're really a lot more of our role as consultant in that is asking them, hey, what do you need from me to manage your schoolwork? I think when we get too much into their business at that age, it tends to create more power struggles, and sometimes we need to do that. I totally get that, depending on our kids. But certainly by the end of high school, we want our kids to be self-sufficient to manage their own time around that stuff. And so I would probably focus a lot more on, this is the structure I'm going to create for my first grader. And then for my freshman and senior, I'm just checking in, hey, do you need something from me in this to manage that? And then I guess I hope you have enough computers. I don't know if, yeah. And
start a computer fund for Stacy. Stacey, I would add to that. I do think, typically, I think natural consequences with our kids, like, hey, if you don't turn that assignment in, you're going to have the consequence of that. I typically am my kids forget their lunch or something, even in elementary school. After too many times, I'm like, hey, I bet they'll stop doing that at some point. My wife's like, no, I'm taking them their lunch. I'm like, all right, that's fine. So I'm all in on natural consequences. But this is historical, and this is different. And most kids aren't ever at even 18, when they're still a senior in high school, they still have teachers holding their hands.
Yeah.
And when they're 14, they still have teachers holding their hands. So they might need a little more hand holding than if they were just going to school because the teachers aren't around. And so I think having some of those honest conversations like, what do you need from me? And then every couple of days, how are you finding, what's it feel like to work without teachers?
Yes.
Do you find it more difficult? Oh, I love it because I can get everything done in 2 hours and I don't have to deal with all the stupid questions from my peers. Like, great, because some kids are like that and other kids are like, it's hard to do it with that. It's like, okay, how? And then you have a real way to say, well, how can I be helpful to you? Well, could you make sure the first grader's not walking in when I'm trying to do this? Could you make sure you're not vacuuming? Could you make sure, like, could I go up to Dad's office, or can I go up to your office and do this with my headphones on, because it's too much, whatever. But we don't know that until we say, like, hey, this is a different way to do school. How are you feeling about this? And then I think they'll answer some of that. So all right, we're gonna try to get to be less wordy. That means I need to be quiet. So Lena says you were tested today for the regular flu, not COVID. 8-year-old was confused why he couldn't go in the doctor's office with you and why you were wearing a mask when you came out, and you understand it's okay.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I think in this, again, with an 8-year-old, we're just clarifying a bit. Yeah, this is actually this is a different, so if you were tested for the flu and not COVID, the reassurance is going to be really important. The mask is about just making sure everybody stays clean, that I'm around, to keep it away from everybody else. We're just trying to prevent as much sickness from passing around as we can, and that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So I think again, it doesn't need to be a long script. I think it can be a short one of just clarifying, and then checking in later. Hey, how are you feeling about the doctor's office today? That was a lot. Like that was so. Being able to just kind of have those checkpoints, and again, I think, at least for my kid, I think for a lot of kids, at bedtime is a really natural time. It's when their bodies are starting to calm down. It's when their minds start to kick back up and process. And so providing an opportunity for them to talk through that a bit further is can be really helpful at that time.
So Joanna said she has 17-year-old daughters. Dad is still going to work outside the home. I'm not sure what kind of work he does, but lots of people still working outside the home. I saw the sanitation workers today. I mean, God bless those guys picking up everybody's trash. You know, I have a brother that works at a grocery store, and I mean, he can't get time off right now if he wants time off. They're just so slammed. So I know there's a lot of people that are still out there. The daughters are worried just that dad is, you know, exposed to the virus. Why are we home if dad's going to work? They've talked about the ways being safe and cautious, but any other ideas on how you would help manage that worry from the 7 and 10-year-old?
Yeah, no, honestly, I think you guys are doing it. I feel like that's that primary work is like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what dad's doing to stay safe. And when dad starts to feel like maybe he's compromising something there, he's going to make a good decision around that. He's going to work to make the changes he needs so that everyone in our family stays safe. And I think it's important too for a lot of kids to understand that you know, there's a lot of people that for kids maybe at 7 and 10, I'm a little cautious with this, but for them to have some understanding that there's a lot of people that are actually going to get this and they'll be okay. A lot of what we're doing as globally right now is we're trying to be considerate citizens to others in the world that have more compromised immune systems, for our friends with that are HIV positive, for the elderly, and so for them to have this is it's a unique opportunity for us to talk about that. And so for your 7 and 10-year-old in that, I think it's just clarifying that, hey, we're taking this day by day, and dad's gonna keep thinking about, he wants more than anything for you guys to feel safe and secure here too, and he wants to be safe. And so these are the things he's doing. These are the things, if you know what his office is doing to make sure that they're safe, and then we're all kind of figuring this out as we go.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the questions, which is great because we're right on time. So, Jeremy, any last words? And then I'll say something really briefly, and then we'll close this out. And tell them in your last words where they can find you, your counseling center, all of that.
Yeah, I'd say if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, your kids are around this, it's a really normal response. That might look like nightmares, trouble sleeping, a fear of being alone. That might be physical pain like stomach aches or headaches. I find even for myself in this, part of the way that my anxiety has looked this week is having a little bit of a headache or coughing in a moment and going, oh my gosh, do I have it? Like, it's just it feels like such an automatic thought. So just being aware of, like, if your anxiety gets higher and higher, it becomes harder and harder for us to be thoughtful parents, to be reflective parents, and so this is it's a unique time, and I think it's a good time to seek help if you need it. So I'm at the Oakwood Collaborative. We're in College Station, Texas, and we have, between the Oakwood Collaborative and then my clinic across the street, Oakwood Roots, there's 25 of us here. Some of us work with insurance, some of us don't. Our schedules are all over the place right now of trying to sort out which clients are here, which clients have left, but we are able to offer telehealth in our so feel free to look us up at oakwoodcounseling.com if you're looking for someone local.
Great, thank you. And I want to tell Jeremy thanks again. He certainly did not have to do this. He was not paid to do this. I knew this was an important conversation. Some of these questions that you asked tonight, And some of the questions that I think that are kind of unspoken right now they're on all of our minds, and we're all really aware of that. And the last thing I'll say as we close out, not as a therapist or a counselor, but just as a dad, is I think there's a really unique forced Sabbath and rest that we're getting right now. And I hope that for the other parents out there, let's do everything we can. Take this very seriously, obviously, and I know it's disrupted our schedules and all that, but what a sweet opportunity for us to have some really special family time that probably we'll never have again in the history. Hopefully, we'll never have again in the history of our family's time. And so, again, I know it's not a vacation. I know there's a lot of extra stressors. I know we're very well aware of why we're home, and we want to be empathetic to the fact that it's not just playtime, but it also is a really unique chance for us to engage our children in ways that we don't usually get to do, and we're going to get to see them more, and they're going to get to see us more. And I don't want everyone to get on the other side of this and wish that they had embraced the moment a little bit more, because for most of us, we would give anything to get this much special one-on-one time with our kids, 1-on-2, 1-on-3, 1-on-4, to be able to co-parent more regularly. This is a really unique situation, and so we wouldn't have chosen it, but it's where we are. And so I hope that some of us will be able to embrace it and to be able to relish this season. Although difficult, it's unique in that the togetherness is unprecedented. And what our kids, I wrote on Facebook a few days ago, and it seemed to really resonate with people. And I said, our kids don't watch the news as much as they watch us. And so they're watching us to see how we respond. And my hope for my kids is that they see that their dad is going to be courageous, that their dad is going to be brave, and that their dad is going to be a helper, not a hoarder. And I think all of our kids need to see that from us, that yes, this is hard, and yes, this is real, and yes, this hurts some people more than others, but that our family's values and our family's principles and our family's North Star, whatever that is for you, it's the same. For my family, we want to help. When we can help, we help. And so I want my kids, that's a lot of why I'm doing what I've been doing this week with these educational videos, is I want my kids to see that, yeah, hard stuff happens and we can't control it, but how do we respond? That's the real question. And so our kids are watching us to see how we respond, and they're learning. And that's not to put pressure on us or to make us feel anxious, but to say we have a great opportunity to show our kids that we can feel something is difficult and still respond with grace, still respond with courage, still respond with authenticity and with vulnerability and with honesty. And it's just a really unique situation. So I hope that the historical nature of it won't overshadow that we are getting some sweet chances with our kids. So, anything else? All right.
Yeah.
You guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Several hundred on from the very beginning, and then it trickled down some here as people got tired of me talking, which is completely understandable there at the end. But Jeremy and I really appreciate you being on. This is very boring to do by ourselves, and probably we wouldn't have done it. So thanks to our wives for letting us spend the evening here instead of with you, and we hope your wine was good. And thank you guys. I really appreciate it, and take care of yourselves during this time. Thanks.